I'm Mia Carter, 24 years old, and in my family, I've always been the shadow, the extra place at the table no one notices until it's time for a cruel joke. At Sunday dinners, my father's pride wrapped itself around Ethan, my brother, while my sister Chloe sharpened every story into another way to laugh at me. My mother never stopped them. If anything, her silence was permission. I learned early that in the Carter household, love was a currency, and I had none to spend. The breaking point came when Chloe replayed my humiliation for everyone, me stumbling at the diner, trays crashing, laughter swelling, as though my pain was a show worth watching. That was the night I understood. I wasn't just ignored. I was entertainment. Ever been treated like your failures were the only thing people wanted to remember? Hit like if someone ever mocked you when you were already at your lowest. Comment if family has ever made you feel invisible in your own home. And for me, the story begins that October morning at the Sunrise Diner, where the word invisible became more than just an insult, it became my cage. The clatter of utensils and the hiss of the espresso machine filled the Sunrise Diner, but louder than all of it was the chorus of subtle sneers that followed me everywhere. The clatter of utensils and the hiss of the espresso machine filled the Sunrise Diner, but louder than all of it was the chorus of subtle sneers that followed me everywhere. To them, I wasn't Mia Carter, 24 years old. Someone with a heart that throbbed just as hard as theirs. To them, I was just the waitress. It started early that morning when the first wave of regulars filed in, shaking off the October chill from the streets of our small Illinois town. The glass door banged closed, jingling the old brass bell above it. Boots scuffed against the worn linoleum tiles, and coats came off in an easy rhythm. They didn't see me. They saw hands that carried plates, a body that ferried coffee, a smile meant to soothe. Jessie Miller hovered near the register, fiddling nervously with the stack of menus. Her eyes darted to me, then away again, like she wanted to say something but couldn't risk the ridicule. I didn't blame her. Jessie was fragile in her own way, a reed bent by every harsh word. She had learned to stay quiet, just like I once had, until silence began to feel like suffocation. Mr. Collins leaned back in his booth, a man with a thinning crown and a voice he wielded like a blade. He'd been coming here for years, and he seemed to think tenure gave him the right to sharpen his humor on whoever was most vulnerable. Today, like most days, it was me. His smirk widened as he watched me navigate between crowded tables, balancing 3 plates on one arm and a pot of coffee in the other. "Careful there," he drawled, loud enough for the whole café to hear. "Our little Mia is as sturdy as cheap furniture. One good shove and she'll collapse." Laughter rippled through the booth beside him. The words hit me, sharp and familiar, and for a moment I imagined they would bounce harmlessly off the armor I'd been building for years. But the sting was still there, a brand pressed into skin that never fully healed. Jessie's lips parted, but she quickly lowered her head, pretending to reorganize the sugar packets. The plates felt heavier. My hands trembled. I tried to steady them with a breath, to focus on the rhythm of the diner, the scrape of chairs, the tap of forks, the hum of chatter. But Collins wasn't done. He never was. "Honestly," he added, sipping his coffee with theatrical calm, "how does someone like her expect to ever be more than a waitress? Invisible is all she'll ever be." The tray tilted. A flash of panic surged through me as gravity betrayed my grip. A porcelain plate slid, then another, and in an instant the crash rang out across the café like a cymbal struck in mockery. Glass shattered, silverware clanged, and conversations halted only to be replaced by a wave of laughter that rolled over me in merciless unison. Heat flooded my face. Knees bent instinctively. I crouched to gather the fragments with shaking hands. Around me, the chorus swelled. Muffled chuckles, a few outright cackles, and Collins's low chuckle of satisfaction. The shards glittered beneath the cafe's fluorescent lights, a jagged mirror reflecting every ounce of humiliation I had endured. Jessie finally moved, kneeling beside me, her whisper barely audible over the noise. "Mia, let me help." I shook my head. If I let her take this weight, then I'd be confirming everything they believed, that I was too weak, too clumsy, too nothing. My fingers pressed against the cold glass, gathering the pieces into trembling palms. My breath steadied, slower now, deeper. When I looked up, laughter still filled the air, but something shifted inside me. A spark lit where shame had smothered every ember before. My eyes caught Collins's for the briefest moment, and his grin faltered, as if he sensed the change. I straightened with the broken tray in hand, and though my body bent in defeat, my gaze did not. Beneath the weight of mockery, beneath the chorus that had named me invisible, something hardened. As Mia bends to pick up broken glass, her eyes flash with quiet determination. In my family, the dinner table was a stage, and I was always the joke. The polished oak gleamed beneath the chandelier's soft glow, silverware lined like soldiers, crystal glasses catching the amber light. On Sundays, the Carters gathered in their suburban house as if performing a ritual. Roast beef at the center, vegetables arranged in perfect symmetry, conversation sharpened into weapons. I sat at my usual place, sandwiched between silence and scrutiny. Across from me, Ethan reclined with practiced ease, his tie loosened just enough to look effortless, his hair slicked back in the way that screamed success. My father leaned forward, eyes lit with pride that I had never once seen directed at me. "Ethan just closed another deal," Richard announced, his voice resonating as though he were sharing gospel. The firm couldn't run without him. Applause in the form of approving nods circled the table. My mother smiled faintly, her hands folded in her lap as if she were sculpted from porcelain. She glanced at me once, then shifted her eyes quickly, as though remembering her role in this drama. "At least Mia knows how to carry a tray," she murmured, her lips curved in something too sharp to be kindness. The words slashed deeper than their softness suggested. A ripple of chuckles followed, Ethan's smirk widening as though my existence had been crafted solely to enhance his brilliance. I lowered my gaze to the fork in my hand, watching the tines catch the light, wishing it were enough to anchor me. But Chloe wasn't finished. She leaned in, her smirk coiled like a snake ready to strike. "Oh, speaking of trays," she began, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I heard about what happened at the café. Dropped an entire set of plates, didn't you, Mia?" Her laughter rang clear, cruel in its delight. "Tell me, did the customers clap when you bowed to clean it all up?" The room erupted, Ethan nearly choking on his wine, Richard chuckling with the weight of approval, Linda pressing her napkin to her lips as if laughter were improper but irresistible. Chloe rose slightly from her chair and mimicked the moment, arms flailing, her voice a caricature of my own. She tilted an imaginary tray, letting invisible plates crash in slow motion. The table howled. Heat scorched my skin. The memory of shattered porcelain at Sunrise Diner bled into this one. Humiliation layered upon humiliation. My chest tightened as if the chandelier's glow had turned into a spotlight, exposing me as the family's comic relief. My fingers curled beneath the table, gripping the cloth with such force I felt the fabric strain. The laughter blurred into a single deafening roar. I forced my face to stillness, though every muscle begged to flinch, to shout, to strike back. My silence was my shield, my vow unspoken but carved deep inside me. I would not always be the invisible one, the joke, the girl bending for broken glass, while others laughed. One day they would see me differently, not as furniture, not as failure, but as something they couldn't ignore. Mia's hands tighten under the tablecloth. She silently vows she won't stay a joke forever. At night, I wasn't a waitress, I was a fighter. The world outside might have named me invisible, but under the dim lights of the Iron Mat Dojo, I carried another name, Survivor. The smell of sweat and disinfectant clung to the air, the faint squeak of bare feet against padded mats, filling the silence between grunts. My apron was replaced by worn training gear, my hands wrapped in tape that bore the marks of repetition. Here, laughter didn't follow me, discipline did. Coach Harris stood at the edge of the mat, arms crossed, his weathered face carved by decades of battles fought and lessons learned. His eyes narrowed not with disdain but with expectation. One day, he had told me countless times, "You'll make them regret their laughter." His words weren't flattery, they were prophecy, and I clung to them like oxygen. Tonight's drills left my muscles screaming, but I pressed on. Push-ups until my arms trembled, shadowboxing until sweat blurred my vision, takedowns until my lungs burned like fire. Each stumble reminded me of that first night years ago when I'd stepped into this place, desperate for an escape. I remembered how I had stood frozen in front of a larger opponent, his smirk not unlike the smirks I endured at the café. The moment he lunged, I had been tossed to the mat, air driven from my lungs, humiliation rushing in like a tide. I hadn't quit. I had risen, bruised and shaking, and asked Harris to teach me how not to fall again. Now, as I staggered through round after round, I knew that humiliation had been my foundation. Harris barked instructions, his voice like gravel, but behind the harshness was belief. "Strength isn't loud, Mia," he reminded me between drills. "Strength waits. It endures. It's patient. When the time is right, it doesn't just strike, it finishes. The philosophy sank into me deeper than any mockery ever could. I carried it with every jab, every sprawl, every kick that landed imperfect but stronger than before. I carried it with the memory of Collins's smirk, Chloe's laughter, Ethan's condescension. Each one fueled the rhythm of my fists, each insult a rep that pushed me beyond what I thought I could bear. The night's sparring session paired me against a man twice my size, shoulders broad as steel beams, his confidence palpable. Whispers among the others said he was untouchable, that I had no chance. I stepped onto the mat, fear clawing at my ribs, but Harris's words steadied me. The bell rang, and he came forward fast, hands reaching for control. He slammed me down once, and the mat rattled beneath my back, but I clawed upward, refusing to stay down. Again and again, he tried to crush me under his weight, and again I twisted, slipped, endured. Finally, when his breath grew heavy and his grip sloppy, I saw the opening. I snaked an arm around his neck, locked my legs, and squeezed with everything I had. He thrashed, tried to break free, but my will held stronger. His hand tapped the mat in surrender. The dojo echoed with the sound, and for the first time in too long, I felt the taste of victory, sharp, clean, undeniable. The others clapped, some in disbelief, some in respect. Harris stepped forward, his expression unreadable, until the corner of his mouth twitched into the faintest smile. He crouched beside me, holding out a folded flyer, the paper crinkled from time in his pocket. "There's a tournament next month," he said, voice low but steady. He pressed the flyer into my damp hand. "It's your time." One stumble, replayed 100 times, became my identity. It wasn't enough that I had lived through the crash of trays and the ringing laughter inside Sunrise Diner. The moment had been captured, edited, and now, thanks to Chloe, it had become a spectacle for every relative to relish. The Carter family living room, usually filled with polished small talk and the clinking of wine glasses, felt suffocating under the dim glow of the projector. The curtains were drawn, the smell of roast beef and perfume heavy in the air, and the crowd of relatives waited with curiosity for whatever Chloe had promised them as entertainment. I already knew the target. Chloe's voice sliced through the chatter, casual yet sharpened like a blade. "Before dessert, I thought we could all share a laugh." She stood near the projector with her phone in hand, smirk curling her lips. I recognized that look. It was the look she gave before she twisted the knife. The screen flickered, and then my humiliation lit up larger than life. The diner floor, my arms wobbling with a heavy tray, the slip, the crash, shards scattering, the uproar of laughter. Gasps turned to chuckles, chuckles to roaring laughter that filled every corner of the room. My cheeks burned as though I were back on that sticky diner floor, surrounded by sneering strangers. Only this time, it was family blood that should have sheltered me leaning back in armchairs, phones raised to capture the moment again, as if it were a comedy reel worth saving. Ethan barked with laughter, slapping Richard on the back as if I had become the punchline of their success. My mother, Linda, pressed her hand lightly to her mouth, pretending shock, but the corner of her eyes betrayed amusement. Richard didn't even bother to hide his smirk. My humiliation wasn't an accident here, it was entertainment. I froze in place, the laughter washing over me like acid. My fists clenched against the sides of my dress, nails biting into skin, but I couldn't move. My chest tightened until every breath scraped raw. Chloe, poised at the projector like a conductor of ridicule, turned just enough for her words to land squarely on me. "Some people are born losers," she said, her voice cutting louder than the laughter. Her finger pointed at the screen, at me stumbling in endless replay. "Proofs, right here." The room roared again, each cackle a nail driving deeper. My heart pounded, but something shifted beneath the shame. For so long I had endured, invisible, a target of jokes that never ended. But in that cruel chorus, in Chloe's sneer, I felt something new, a crackle of rage, not loud but steady. I rose abruptly, the chair scraping harsh against the wooden floor. The laughter faltered for a beat, curiosity sharpening their eyes, waiting for another mistake, another slip to feed on. Instead, I forced my trembling body forward, each step toward the door heavy, with humiliation and fury intertwined. Tears stung, but I swallowed them back, unwilling to let Chloe have the satisfaction of seeing me broken. My hand closed around the doorknob, cold metal grounding me. I glanced back once at the sea of faces twisted in mockery, Chloe in the center glowing with triumph. The humiliation still burned, but above it rose a whisper escaping my lips, too soft for them to hear, but fierce enough to brand into my own resolve. Not anymore. The door slammed behind me, muting the laughter, cutting me loose from their stage. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just enduring, I was preparing. The night I signed my name, I stopped being invisible. The rain outside pressed its fingers against the dojo windows, a steady rhythm that felt like a drumbeat urging me forward. The small office smelled of worn leather and ink, its walls lined with faded posters from tournaments long past. A single lamp cast a pool of yellow light over the desk where Coach Harris sat, papers neatly stacked, pen poised. My heart hammered with a mixture of fear and defiance, as if the decision waiting for me would mark a line I could never step back over. Jessie stood near the doorway, arms crossed tight around herself, her eyes flicking nervously from me to Harris. She had followed me here after another grueling shift at the diner, confusion written across her face. She thought she knew me, the clumsy, mocked waitress who kept her head down. She didn't yet know the truth. I drew in a breath and finally let it out. Jessie, I've been training here for years. The words tumbled into the quiet, shocking even to say aloud. Every night after the café, I come here. This is who I really am. Her mouth fell open. You? Training? Mia? Why didn't you tell me? I shrugged, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Because being invisible was easier. No one expects anything of the girl who just serves coffee. No one notices her. But I'm done letting them write my story for me. Jessie's expression shifted from disbelief to awe, her eyes softening with something I hadn't felt from anyone in so long. Faith, I always knew you were stronger than you let on. I just didn't know how much. If this is your path, I'll stand with you. Her words sank deep, warming something cold inside me. For the first time, I realized I wasn't completely alone. Coach Harris cleared his throat, practical as always. Enough sentiment. If you're serious, Mia, it's time to make it official. He slid the registration form toward me across the desk, the pen resting like a challenge atop the paper. The regional tournament is in 4 weeks. Once your name is here, there's no turning back. Training will double, pressure will triple. The world will be watching. The paper seemed to glow under the lamplight, my future distilled into a few blank lines. I hesitated, my pulse quickening as echoes of humiliation tried to claw their way back. Laughter in the diner, smirks at the dinner table, Chloe's voice branding me a loser. But then, Harris's mantra echoed in my mind like a steady anchor. Justice may come late, but it will come. I lowered the pen to the paper, my hand trembling for a second before firming. With each stroke of ink, I felt the years of invisibility peeling away. By the time I lifted the pen, Mia Carter sprawled boldly across the form, undeniable and permanent. My chest swelled with a strange new certainty this was the first true step toward reclaiming myself. Jessie clapped softly, as though afraid to break the spell. You did it, she whispered, her eyes shining. I smiled, not timidly, but with the edge of someone stepping into the light for the first time. No more hiding. Harris gathered the papers with a satisfied nod. Now the real work begins. But before the moment could settle, a flicker of movement caught in the corner of my eye. Near the office doorway, just beyond the lamplight's reach, a figure lingered in silence. Chloe stood there, her silhouette sharp, her smirk unmistakable. Her eyes glittered with malice, drinking in the sight of my name inked on the form. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. That smile alone promised sabotage, whispered that my fight was only beginning. In small towns, rumors don't walk, they sprint. By the time I stepped into the diner that afternoon, it felt like the walls already knew my secret. The place was quieter than usual. The post-lunch lull where plates cooled on counters and the smell of burnt coffee lingered. Yet in the hush, whispers slithered from booth to booth, traveling quicker than any order Jessie or I could ever carry. I felt it first in the way a pair of teenage girls near the window giggled as I passed with a pot of coffee. One leaned into the other, muttering something, then both burst into muffled laughter. At the counter, 2 older men hunched over pie slices shook their heads, smirks tugging at their lips. The words reached me in broken fragments: fight, waitress, ridiculous. But the tone carried enough. They weren't here for the food. They were here for me. I forced my hands steady as I set mugs down, though the heat of humiliation crawled up my neck. Each laugh felt like the echo of my family's table, Chloe's voice reverberating in every corner of the diner. Jessie slid beside me at the service station, pretending to stack napkins. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Mia, this isn't random. Chloe's feeding them. The sting sharpened. I'd known Chloe would retaliate after she saw my registration form, But I hadn't expected the strike to come so soon or so low. Of course she is, I muttered, trying to keep my face calm as a customer waved me over. I approached the booth, tray in hand, only to freeze when one of the men barked a laugh. You hear this? The invisible waitress thinks she's going to fight. Can you picture it? Tripping on her own feet before the bell even rings. Their laughter slapped harder than any blow I'd taken on the mat. I set the plates down without a word, but my jaw tightened until it hurt. The tray shook faintly in my grip as I turned back toward the counter. Jessie's eyes brimmed with sympathy, but I waved her off. I couldn't show weakness here, not to them. Not when Chloe wanted nothing more than to see me unravel. Still, the mockery clung like grease I couldn't wash off. Every whisper that floated through the room was another stone on my chest. I wanted to scream, to tell them they knew nothing of the hours I'd bled into the mat, the bruises I'd carried home in silence. Instead, I smiled tightly, refilled coffees, and tried to pretend their words didn't cut as deep as they did. Then Mr. Collins sauntered in. The regular who had once compared me to cheap furniture, now with an even hungrier look in his eye. He sat at the counter, arms spread wide, claiming space like he owned it. Afternoon, Mia, he drawled, and I knew from the way his lips curled that he'd come not for pie, but for sport. I set his coffee down before he even asked. He didn't touch it. Instead, he leaned forward across the counter, his breath sour with cigarettes. Word is you signed up for a tournament. That true? My silence only encouraged him. His grin widened. You'll get crushed out there. People like you should know their place. The words struck harder than his tone. It wasn't just doubt, it was dismissal, as if the mere thought of me stepping beyond this counter was laughable. My fists tightened around the rag in my hand, knuckles whitening. I wanted to throw it in his face, to tell him that every sneer like his was fuel. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to swallow the burn clawing at my throat. Jessie touched my arm lightly, grounding me. She waited until Collins was distracted by a bite of pie, then leaned close enough that only I could hear. If Chloe's behind this, what else will she do? The question chilled me more than the laughter ever could. Because I knew the answer. Chloe was just getting started. When the clerk said my form was missing a signature, my stomach dropped. The words hung in the stale, fluorescent-lit air of the Illinois Martial Arts League office like a sentence passed. Papers stacked high on every desk, the faint hum of printers, and the squeak of a ceiling fan overhead, all of it seemed to mock me. I stood frozen, the echo of the clerk's tone replaying in my ears, while the pen I'd used that rainy night still lived in my memory, black ink biting into the page. I knew I had signed it. Coach Harris shifted beside me, his broad shoulders tensing under his worn jacket. What do you mean, missing? He asked, voice low but firm. The clerk adjusted his glasses, sliding the form across the counter. Look for yourself. No signature here. Without it, this entry is invalid. Rules are rules. His tone was flat, rehearsed, the voice of someone who had said those words too many times before. I leaned forward, staring at the paper. The line where my name had been was blank, smooth, too clean. My chest tightened. I remembered the scratch of the pen, the ink bleeding slightly on cheap paper. It wasn't a memory I could fabricate. It was real. And now, it was gone. I signed it. I said, the words trembling, but hard as steel. I was here with Coach Harris, he saw me. Harris nodded, placing his hand flat on the counter. I watched her. That form had her name when she handed it in. Someone's tampered with it. The clerk frowned, glancing between us. That's a serious accusation. He hesitated, lowering his voice. But you're not the first to complain about forms being tampered with this year. My pulse hammered faster. So you admitted someone erased it? All I can admit is what's in front of me. He tapped the empty line. No signature, no entry. You have 24 hours to resubmit, or the roster closes. After that, I can't help you. 24 hours. It felt like a noose tightening. The thought of losing everything before I'd even stepped onto the mat made my throat burn. Harris's hand gripped my shoulder, grounding me, his voice steady in my ear. We'll fix this. You'll sign again. But remember what I told you, Mia. Guard not just your body, but your path. People will strike where they think you're weakest. I knew exactly who he meant. Chloe's smirk in the dojo doorway replayed in my mind, the way she had watched me sign that first form like a vulture circling prey. This was her hand, her venom, hidden behind the polite face of a clerk. We left the office under a heavy gray sky. The streets outside were lined with cracked sidewalks and bare trees, autumn leaves scattering in the wind like fragments of something broken. I hugged my coat tighter, my mind swirling with equal parts fury and despair. Across the parking lot, a car idled. Through the windshield, I caught the unmistakable shape of Chloe. Her hair gleamed even in the dull light. Her lips curled into a smile that made my skin crawl. She raised her coffee cup in a mock salute, eyes never leaving mine, then took a slow sip, as if savoring my pain. I tore my gaze away, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. But deep inside, the truth seared hot and sharp. She had struck once, and she would strike again. Defeat isn't when they push you down, it's when you decide not to rise. Coach Harris's words echoed in the dim dojo as rain battered the roof like a relentless drum. The mats smelled faintly of sweat and rubber, their surface slick under the pale glow of the overhead lights. I sat slumped against the wall, gloves dangling at my sides, every breath jagged with exhaustion and rage. The day had drained me hollow. Chloe's shadow clung to every thought, her smirk taunting me even in silence. "It's pointless," I muttered, staring at the floor where countless fighters had bled and fallen. "She'll keep blocking me. No matter what I do, she'll twist it." Jessie, perched on the bench with a towel around her shoulders, leaned forward. Her eyes, usually timid, now carried fire. "If you quit now, Chloe already won. Is that what you want? To hand her the victory before you've even stepped into the ring?" The words cut deep, sharper than I expected. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell her she didn't understand, but the truth snagged in my chest. I wanted to fight, but what if Chloe was right? What if the world would never let me rise above just a waitress? Harris crossed the mat with slow, deliberate steps. His presence filled the room even without raising his voice. He knelt before me, his weathered face lined with decades of battles both won and lost. "Mia," he said softly, yet the weight of his tone pressed harder than any strike. "You've been fighting since the first day you walked through that door. I remember your first spar you got knocked flat, but you stood back up before the count was done. That's who you are." I swallowed, the memory flashing. My younger self sprawled on this very mat, laughter ringing in my ears then too, only to rise again with trembling legs and fire in my chest. "Listen to me," Harris continued, his hand firm on my shoulder. "This isn't just about the tournament. Chloe wants you to break before the bell even rings. But fighting isn't just on the mat, it's here." He tapped my chest, over my heart, and out there. He gestured toward the rain-smeared window, to the world beyond. Fight on both mats, life and competition. Don't let her steal either from you. Jessie nodded, her voice steady, almost fierce. "We're with you, Mia. You're not standing alone anymore." Their words coiled around the hollow inside me, filling it with something heavier, steadier. My fists clenched, not in despair but in resolve. My body ached, my spirit felt bruised, but the ember inside flared again. I pushed myself up from the wall, planting my feet on the mat as if claiming it anew. My voice didn't shake this time. "Then I'll fight twice as hard. She can throw everything at me, but I won't back down." Harris's eyes gleamed with quiet pride. Jessie smiled through her worry, as though she too could see the shift the moment the invisible waitress chose to become something else entirely. The rain pounded harder outside, masking the sound of my heartbeat racing with determination. For the first time in days, I felt taller, unbroken. But somewhere else, in the shadows beyond our sanctuary, Chloe leaned back in her car seat, phone pressed to her ear. Her laugh was low, poisonous. "Plan B starts tomorrow." My bag was gone. My heart sank. The locker room smelled of disinfectant and damp fabric, the air heavy with the steam of earlier showers. I stood before the open metal cubby where my gear should have been, staring at the empty space as if my gloves and wraps might magically appear if I blinked hard enough. But there was nothing, only the cold, hollow echo of absence. Jessie stepped in behind me, tightening her ponytail as she noticed my stillness. "What's wrong?" "My bag," I said, my voice flat, the weight of dread pulling each word down. "It's gone." She frowned and scanned the rows of lockers. "Maybe you left it at home?" "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I brought it in. I put it right here." My hand touched the shelf as if proof might be hiding in the grooves of the scratched paint. The memory was vivid. Unzipping the bag, pulling out my water bottle, sliding it back into this very spot. I wasn't imagining it. Jessie hesitated, chewing her lip. I saw Chloe earlier. Near the lockers. I thought she was just waiting around, but her words sliced through the stale air like a blade. The image of Chloe, leaning with casual arrogance, flashed in my mind. I clenched my fists. Of course it was her. Coach Harris entered from the hallway, his footsteps steady, carrying the weight of decades on the mat. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes narrowing when he saw my pale face. "My bag's missing," I said quickly. "Everything. Gloves, guy, wraps." He studied me, then Jesse, before his expression hardened. "Search the place. Check every corner." We scoured the locker room, under benches, behind doors, even inside lost and found bins. Nothing. My pulse climbed with every empty glance. Minutes later, one of the gym staff hurried in, a grim look plastered on his face. "We found something," he said. "Outside." We followed him through the back hallway and out into the narrow alley, where the smell of rain, soaked asphalt, and old trash mixed into a rancid haze. There, next to a dented dumpster, sat my duffel bag, its zipper half open, its contents scattered like entrails. I dropped to my knees, fingers trembling as I gathered my gloves, damp and smeared with something foul from the trash. My uniform clung to the stench of rot. This wasn't just theft, it was desecration. Then, I saw a folded slip of paper wedged inside the bag's front pocket. My stomach churned as I opened it. The letters were scrawled in thick, black ink, sharp enough to cut. "You won't make it to the mat." The alley seemed to tighten around me. The rain tapped harder on the dumpster lid, each drop like a mocking laugh. Harris's jaw set like stone. "This isn't coincidence. It's targeted. She wants you broken before you even step inside the ring." I crumpled the note in my hand, heat rising behind my eyes. Rage, fear, and a twisted sort of resolve tangled in my chest. Chloe wanted to strip me of more than gear. She wanted to strip me of identity, of courage. But she hadn't counted on the one thing she couldn't steal. Beside me, Jessie bent down, her phone hidden in her palm. I heard the faint click of a photo being taken. She slipped the device back into her pocket before anyone noticed, her face carefully blank. She didn't say a word, but when her gaze met mine, I caught the flicker of determination burning there. I exhaled, clutching my ruined gloves. The fight hadn't even begun, yet every step toward the mat was already a battlefield. The morning of the tournament, every obstacle lined up against me. The sky churned with heavy clouds, low and bruised purple, as if the storm itself wanted to drown my resolve. I stood at the bus stop, clutching my duffel, soaked sneakers squeaking against the pavement. The timetable pinned to the glass shivered in the wind, but my eyes caught the red notice taped across it. Route cancelled. The one bus that would have taken me directly to the arena had vanished, like the rug yanked from under me. My throat tightened. "No, no, no," I whispered, fists pressing against the glass. Jessie appeared, sprinting across the slick sidewalk, hair plastered to her cheeks. "Mia, the route's shut down. I checked the tracker. It's not coming." I shook my head. "I'll miss registration." Her chest rose and fell with sharp urgency. "Then we run. You said you'd fight, right?" Run. The rain came in sheets now, stinging needles against my skin. My duffel weighed on my shoulder like lead, straps digging into muscle. We bolted, shoes splashing through water that seemed determined to drag us backward. Every step felt slower than the last, but Jessie's voice cut through the storm. "Keep going, don't stop." Then, as if the storm itself took human form, Chloe emerged from the shadows of an alley, umbrella poised like a weapon, her smirk gleaming even through the downpour. "Turn back, Mia," she called, her voice silky, cruel. "You're nothing but a joke. Even fate knows you don't belong there." Her words clawed at my chest, the same sneer she'd worn at dinners, in the café, every time she thought she'd won. My legs faltered, knees burning from the sprint. The gates of the sports center loomed in the distance, blurred through the curtain of rain. "You'll collapse before you get there," Chloe taunted, stepping closer, her shoes untouched by mud. "Save yourself the humiliation." Jessie's hand gripped mine, nails biting into my skin. "Don't listen. Run." I forced one more step, then another. My breath came ragged, my chest on fire, raindrops tasting of salt and iron. The gates were so close, yet my body buckled, legs folding beneath me as the weight of the storm and Chloe's venom dragged me down. The concrete was cold against my palms. The world spun, edges fading gray. And then 2 strong arms seized me, lifting me up from the ground. "On your feet, Carter," Harris's gravelly voice barked. He half dragged, half pushed me through the gate, his coat dripping like mine. Inside, a clerk slammed the registration book shut, but Harris thrust his hand out. "She's here. Sign her in." The pen shook in my grip as I scrawled my name, the ink smudging from rain. My heart thundered not from the run, but from the knowledge that I had made it. Barely, desperately, but I had made it. Behind us, Chloe lingered at the street's edge, her umbrella a black silhouette against the storm, her smirk fading for the first time. A whistle cut through the air, sharp and final. The referee's voice boomed from inside the hall. "First match, Mia Carter. You're up." The referee's whistle pierced the air, and the laughter I'd carried for years echoed in my head. The bright lights of the Illinois Martial Arts League arena burned hotter than the cafe's ovens. Hotter even than the humiliation that had seared me into silence all these years. Rows of bleachers trembled beneath the stomping of feet, an ocean of strangers whose cheers and jeers blended into one unrelenting roar. Somewhere in that blur of faces, I caught sight of Chloe's smirk, glinting like a knife. Ethan seated beside her, arms crossed in smug anticipation. My father's stiff posture and my mother's lowered eyes only sharpened the ache inside me. I stepped onto the mat, my legs trembling with the weight of more than just nerves. I bowed stiffly, almost robotic, forcing the breath into my lungs as the referee's hand cut through the air. Now, I told myself, now you prove you exist. My opponent, taller and broad-shouldered, wasted no time. She charged, the mat rattling beneath her speed, and slammed into me with enough force to rattle my teeth. My knees buckled, my back kissed the mat, and for a moment the old laughter surged back, cafe trays clattering, family mocking, Chloe's voice hissing in every corner of my life. The crowd's cheers blurred into cruel echoes of the past. She'll never be more than a waitress. Her weight bore down, her grip vice-locked around my shoulders. My lungs screamed for air. I tasted panic, bitter and metallic, the same taste I'd swallowed 1,000 times when no one believed I was anything but invisible. But then Harris's voice cut through the chaos, calm and gravelly. "Breathe. Remember who you are." I did. I remembered every morning run before dawn, every bruise hidden beneath my uniform, every cruel smirk I'd endured in silence. My chest tightened not with fear, but with anger. No more. Never again. I twisted my hips, shifting like Harris had drilled me. My opponent tried to tighten her grip, but I slipped one arm free, rolling us just enough to create space. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I wriggled out from under her weight. Her fists pummeled at the mat for leverage, but I was faster this time. My body, drenched in sweat and adrenaline, moved not like the waitress they mocked, but like the fighter I had forged in secret. Her arm was exposed for only a second. It was enough. I hooked it, swung my legs up, and locked them tight. Her eyes widened as realization hit too late. I arched my back, pulling with every ounce of rage and endurance I had stored over the years. Her hand slapped the mat once, twice loud and desperate. The whistle shrieked again. Silence flooded the arena. For one surreal heartbeat, no one moved. No one spoke. Then the referee's hand shot up, pointing at me. Victory. My chest heaved, tears mingling with sweat as I released her arm and scrambled back onto my knees. The arena erupted, some in shock, some in awe, some still unable to believe what they had just seen. I bowed, shakier than before, but this time it was not in shame. It was in defiance. In the stands, Harris's proud nod met my gaze, and Jessie's hands clapped furiously, her face bright with vindication. But just beyond them, Chloe leaned close to Ethan, her lips curling in disdain. "It was luck," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss. "She'll crumble next." Applause loudly, but their eyes still doubted me. The echoes of my first victory hadn't even faded before whispers spread through the arena like wildfire. I could hear them even in the waiting area, past the smell of liniment and sweat, past the buzz of the fluorescent lights. To the gamblers, to the spectators, to half the people sitting in the stands, I was still a fluke, an accident of timing, a waitress who had gotten lucky. And Chloe made sure that thought grew roots. She strutted along the rows of folding chairs, her voice pitched to Carrie. $100, she called, her smirk dripping with confidence. "Says she won't last 2 minutes this time." Bills exchanged hands with eager certainty. The crowd chuckled and nodded. Her words laced their doubts with poison. To them, it wasn't cruel, it was entertainment. Jessie sat beside me, her small hand gripping my wrist tight enough to leave a mark. "Don't listen," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned. They'll think it's a fluke until you show them twice. Harris crouched in front of me, eyes steady, grounding me as the chaos swirled outside. Focus on the mat, Mia, not on their words. Their eyes won't matter once their voices go silent again. He placed a hand on my shoulder, rough and reassuring. When my name was called, my pulse thundered against my ribs. My second opponent stepped forward, a man built like an oak, shoulders wide enough to eclipse the mat lights. He rolled his neck, joints cracking like gunshots, and sneered as if my very presence insulted him. The whistle blew. He lunged with no hesitation, sweeping my legs out and slamming me to the ground with bone-rattling force. Pain shot through my back, breath ripped from my chest. The crowd roared in approval, their laughter louder than my gasp for air. His forearm pressed against my throat, hot and merciless. For a split second, panic clawed at me. This could end before it even began. But Harris's voice rang out in memory. Guard not just your body, but your path. I clung to the mat, forcing my panic down. Patience. Wait. My ribs ached, but I felt the pressure in his grip shift, too eager, too careless. I turned with the tide instead of against it, twisting my hips, coiling my legs around his torso. He grunted, caught off guard. With a surge born of every insult I'd ever endured, I looped my arm under his and snaked upward, climbing him like a tree desperate to survive the storm. His weight tried to crush me, but gravity was mine to command now. The choke locked in. Gasps erupted from the bleachers. His body thrashed, fists pounding at my arm, but the longer he fought, the tighter I sealed it. My heart hammered, every second stretching into an eternity. And then 3 frantic taps against the mat. The referee's whistle split the air. Silence fell, sharp as a blade. For the second time, I rose not as the invisible girl who carried trays, but as someone they could no longer dismiss with laughter. Their applause thundered again, but this time it was shaken, uncertain. No one could quite reconcile the image of a waitress they had mocked with the fighter who had forced a man twice her size to surrender. In the crowd, Chloe's smile faltered, but she clapped sarcastically, fanning the flames of disbelief. Beginner's luck again, she called, loud enough to be heard, though her eyes darted nervously. And then Ethan's voice broke the tension. He leaned forward in his seat, his words not for Chloe but for himself, muttered like a confession he couldn't contain. That's my sister? His certainty cracked, and with it, the foundation Chloe had worked so hard to build began to tremble. The more I won, the darker Chloe's eyes burned. It wasn't just the matches, it was the cracks that appeared in her mask every time my hand was raised. I could feel her glare burning from the stands, hotter than the arena lights themselves. By the time the semifinals bracket was posted, the air buzzed with anticipation. The board gleamed under the harsh fluorescent glow, my name etched among the final 4. Whispers rippled through the crowd like an undercurrent waiting to drag me under. Chloe stepped forward in the stands, her voice slicing through the murmur. $500, she announced, her smirk widening as eyes turned toward her. She won't make it past the semifinals. Gasps echoed, then a wave of laughter. Bettors leaned in, money changing hands in quick, greedy movements. To them, Chloe was a sure compass if she bet against me. The odds must have been absolute. My father's lips tightened, pride buried under discomfort, while Linda turned her gaze away, unwilling to confront the spectacle. Ethan's brow furrowed, uncertain for the first time. Harris stood beside me in the waiting area, arms crossed, gaze unwavering. Let them bet, he said quietly, his voice steady as iron. Every dollar wagered is just fuel for you. When my name was called, I bowed, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. The mat stretched wide and merciless beneath me, my opponent looming tall, his arms heavy with muscle and reputation. His stare promised punishment. The whistle blew. He lunged. His grip locked around my shoulders, his weight forcing me down, twisting until my spine screamed in protest. My lungs seized under the crushing hold, the roar of the crowd blending with Chloe's laugh, echoing from the stands. My fingers clawed at the mat, nails scraping uselessly against canvas. The pressure tightened. If I didn't tap, something would snap. Defeat isn't when they push you down, it's when you decide not to rise. Harris's voice struck through the haze, pulling me back from the edge. I shifted my hips, searching for leverage, a sliver of space. My opponent's focus tightened, confident he had me trapped. And in that moment, patience paid off. I twisted hard, rolling into the gap, momentum flipping as his balance faltered. In a rush of instinct, I slid free, coiled like a spring, then locked my legs around his torso. My arms snapped around his neck, sealing the hold he hadn't seen coming. The crowd fell silent. His face flushed red, his fists pounding weakly against my arm. For one breathless second, time stopped, then he tapped. The whistle's shriek split the arena. The silence cracked, replaced by gasps, disbelief, and a few stunned cheers. I collapsed back against the mat, chest heaving, heart hammering in my ears. My body ached with victory, fragile but undeniable. Up in the stands, Chloe's composure shattered. Her fist slammed against the railing, the crack of knuckles against metal silencing even the gamblers who had profited off her words. "She cheated," she screamed, voice raw and shrill. "This isn't real. She doesn't belong here." But no one echoed her this time. The weight of her fury hung in the air, desperate, grasping, and for the first time, her certainty looked like fear. This wasn't just a final, it was my trial, and the jury was everyone who had ever laughed. The championship mat stretched beneath the glaring spotlight, its edges fading into a blur of faces and noise. The arena thundered with anticipation, each cheer and jeer colliding into a single storm above me. My palms were slick with sweat as I bowed, forcing myself to lock eyes with the reigning champion across from me. He stood tall, built like iron, the embodiment of everything people believed I could never overcome. Somewhere in the crowd, Chloe leaned forward, lips curled into a poisonous smile. I could almost hear her words, even before she spoke them. "If she wins, I'll kneel before everyone here." The thought was gasoline on the fire inside me. The referee signaled. The whistle pierced the air. My opponent launched at me with ferocity I'd never felt before. His arms wrapped around me, his weight suffocating as we slammed onto the canvas. His grip snaked around my neck, crushing off air, pressing my body flat against the mat. The roar of the crowd dimmed into a muffled hum as my lungs screamed for breath. Spots of light danced in my vision. "Don't quit!" Harris's voice cut through the haze, as sharp as a blade. Blood filled my mouth where his elbow had raked across my lip. Pain radiated down my arms. My body screamed, "Give up." But my heart clung to every memory, every cruel word, every burst of laughter that had carved scars into me since childhood. Collins at the diner calling me invisible furniture. Chloe replaying my stumble on a projector for all to see. My own father's pride directed only toward Ethan. "You're nothing but a joke." The words became fuel. I twisted my hips, searching for air, for leverage, for anything. The champion pressed harder, confident he had me finished. My chest heaved, fire burning in my lungs, but in that pressure I found clarity. If this was my trial, I would not walk out guilty of failure. With one desperate surge, I shifted, sliding my legs free, rolling beneath his weight. My hand gripped his wrist, forcing space where none should exist. I shoved with everything left in me, reversing momentum as the crowd erupted in disbelief. Suddenly I was above him, pressing, driving, pinning him to the mat. The world slowed. I locked my arms around his neck, legs coiled like chains. He fought, bucked, tried to tear free, but my hold tightened with every memory of humiliation, every sneer that had crushed me. My blood dripped onto the mat, mixing with sweat, and still I held on. The referee crouched close, eyes fixed. The champion's fists pounded against my arm, weaker, then weaker still. Finally he tapped. The whistle shrieked, the sound cracking open the arena. For a heartbeat, silence held, then the explosion of cheers shook the rafters. The referee raised my arm high, and in that moment, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the family joke. I wasn't the girl mocked at a diner table. I was the champion. Harris's face lit with pride. Jesse's cheers echoed somewhere above. Even Ethan sat frozen, his certainty unraveling. But amid the sea of voices, Chloe's rose above them all, venomous and desperate. She shot up from her seat, her scream slicing through the celebration. "This victory is mine. She wouldn't even be here without me." And just like that, the crowd turned, gasps rippling as every eye fell on Chloe. Even in my triumph, Chloe clawed to steal the light. The podium gleamed under a spray of golden light, the trophy cool and solid in my trembling hands. The crowd buzzed with cameras clicking, voices layering in waves of awe, skepticism, and anticipation. My chest still heaved from the final match, but victory hummed through me like a steady current. For the first time, I felt weightless until Chloe's heels struck the stage like hammers. She pushed past an official, her face sharp with rage and desperation. "She won thanks to me," Chloe declared, her voice pitched high to command the crowd. "I pushed her into this. Without me, she wouldn't even be standing here." Her words cracked the celebration in half. Murmurs rolled through the audience. Some leaned forward, brows furrowed, considering her claim. My father's jaw tensed. My mother's eyes darted away. Ethan folded his arms as if part of him wanted to believe Chloe was right. The air thickened with doubt. Jessie stepped from the sidelines, small but steady, her phone raised like a sword. Her voice wavered at first, but hardened as she projected across the hall. Then explain this. The giant screens above the podium flickered, and suddenly Chloe's private cruelty glowed 10 feet tall. There she was in grainy stills, hovering by the lockers, her hand slipping into my bag, pulling my gear free. Another photo showed the note scrawled in her handwriting. "You won't make it to the mat." Gasps rattled the hall. Chloe staggered, shaking her head. Lies! Fabrications! Harris moved next, calm and unshakable, his age, roughened hand holding up printed messages. These are the texts she sent to the clerk, demanding Mia's form be pulled, altered, destroyed. They bear her name, her number, her timestamps. I verified them myself. The room froze. The officials whispered, heads bent, their eyes snapping back to Chloe with every page. Gasps turned into outright condemnation. A woman in the front row hissed, "Sabotage." A man muttered, "She cheated the system." The laughter that had so often been turned on me now sliced into Chloe, her face drained of color, the sharp edges of her confidence collapsing under the weight of exposure. She took a step back, then another, hands trembling, as if to ward off the truth pressing in from all sides. My family, the same people who once ridiculed me, leaned away from her, no longer willing to share her shadow. For a long breath, silence sat heavy. Then the chants began, not mocking, not cruel, but rising in my favor. "Mia, Mia, Mia." The sound hit like thunder, rolling over me in waves. I lifted the microphone from its stand, the weight of years pressing into my palm. My voice, steady, though my heart pounded, cut through the chaos. They laughed once. Tonight they see who I really am. The crowd erupted again, this time with cheers that carried no doubt. Chloe stood frozen in disgrace, Jessie glowing with vindication, Harris proud as a father. For the first time, the spotlight was mine, untarnished, undeniable. Under the blazing lights of the award ceremony, truth finally crushed deceit, and the one once mocked as invisible stood where no one could deny her worth. Justice had come late, bruised and scarred through a battlefield of sabotage, but when it arrived, it silenced every jeer and left the guilty exposed. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Allah. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Type 1 if you felt the same fire of justice, or 2 if you think the journey could burn even brighter.